The night Oluchi realized she was alone in the forest of whispers, she was still holding the empty basket her stepmother had pressed into her hands that morning. She turned in a slow circle, calling the woman's name, and the darkness swallowed her voice the way water swallows a stone. No answer came back. Only the trees answered. And the trees in that forest did not rustle like ordinary trees. They whispered. Hundreds of voices, soft as breath, speaking words she could almost understand. Oluchi stood in that whispering darkness, 16 years old, barefoot, and understood two things at once. The first was that her stepmother had never intended for her to come home. The second was something she could not yet name, a feeling, cold and certain, that the forest had been waiting for her. What she did not know, standing there in the dark, was that before the next full moon, the entire village of Nwakaego would gather in her father's compound, and a secret buried for 9 years would stand up in front of everyone and speak with a living human voice. And the woman who had left her in that forest to die would be the one who gave that secret its mouth. Before we go back to where this story truly begins, if you love powerful African stories, stories of wickedness, patience, and the kind of justice that arrives on its own legs, take 1 second to subscribe and tap the notification bell so you never miss the stories we tell here. And if you're already a part of this family, drop a still watching in the comments so I know you're with me tonight. Now, settle in. Let us go back to the beginning. Back to a small village at the edge of a forbidden forest, and a girl whose only crime was that her mother died too soon. In the village of Nwakaego, sat in the palm of 2 low hills in the eastern country of the Igbo, where the red earth stains everything it touches and the morning air smells of wood smoke and wet cassava. On the far side of the village, past the last compound and the stream, the land rose gently and then stopped, as if it had come to a wall. That wall was the forest. Ohia Olulu, the old people called it, the forest of whispers. Even at noon, its shadow was cool and deep, and travelers on the footpath that skirted its edge would quicken their steps without knowing why. Children were told from the time they could walk, gather firewood at the edge, pick mushrooms where the sunlight still reaches, but never, ever follow the path that bends inward, the one that disappears between the 2 Iroko trees that stand like gateposts. Because the forest whispers, the elders said, and whatever is doing the whispering has been there longer than the village, longer than the hills, longer than memory itself. In this village lived a girl named Oluchi, the only child of Masi Ejike, a palm oil trader, and his first wife, Adaogo. By every account that mattered, the kindest woman in Nwakaego. People still talked about her, how she never let a hungry child pass her compound without eating, how she carried firewood for widows who had no sons, how the night the drunkard Nuafor's house caught fire, it was Adaogo who ran in for his children while the men were still shouting instructions at each other. She had a saying the whole village knew: the hand that gives does not sleep hungry. She said it when she gave, and she said it when she had nothing left to give, as if reminding the world of a debt it owed her. Oluchi was 8 years old when her mother died. It happened fast, so fast that the village still lowered its voice when speaking of it. Adaogo woke up one morning healthy, laughing, pounding yam for her husband's breakfast. By evening, she was gripping her stomach. By the 3rd day, she was gone. Sudden illness, people said. The stomach sickness, people said. God's will, people said. Because that is what people say when they have no better answer. Masiejike buried his wife under the orange tree she had planted behind their house, and for a full year he moved through the village like a man walking underwater. Before she died, in the last hour when the pain let go of her just enough to speak, Adaogo called her small daughter to her mat, took off the bracelet she always wore, a simple string of dark red coral beads, old and smooth from years against her skin, and tied it around Oluchi's thin wrist. "Your grandmother gave me this," she whispered, "and her mother gave it to her. As long as you wear it, my hand is holding your hand. Do you hear me? whatever comes, my hand is holding your hand." Those were nearly her last words. Oluchi never took the bracelet off, not once, in 9 years. When the string wore thin, she restrung the beads herself by firelight, with thread waxed the way her mother had taught her. For 2 years after Adaogo's death, it was just Oluchi and her father, and though grief sat at their table like a third person, they managed. Masiejike was a good man, in the way soft-hearted men are good. Gentle, generous, slow to see evil in anyone. His trade took him away for weeks at a time, down to the riverside market and as far as Onitsha, and it troubled him to leave his small daughter with neighbors. The village troubled him about it too. A man cannot remain unmarried, the elders told him. A house without a wife is a farm without a fence. And so, in the 3rd year, Masiejike married again. Her name was Nwakaego. She came from a village 2 days' journey away, a widow, tall and striking, with a daughter of her own, Chidera, 1 year younger than Oluchi. On the day she first entered the compound, Nwakaego knelt before Masiejike's kinsmen, pressed Oluchi to her chest and wept. "I did not come to replace her mother, I came to be a second mother. This child will never know the difference between my daughter and herself. They are both my daughters now. I have said it before God and before all of you." The women wiped their eyes. The elders nodded. Masiejike looked at his new wife holding his motherless child, and something in his chest that had been clenched for 3 years finally loosened. For as long as Masiejike was home, Nwakaego kept that promise so beautifully that visitors could not tell which girl had come from her own body. She called Oluchi "my daughter," in a voice like warm honey. But palm oil does not sell itself, and a trader must travel. The first morning after Masiejike's motorcycle disappeared down the Onitsha road, 11-year-old Oluchi came in from sweeping to find her breakfast gone, her sleeping mat moved to the storeroom where the rats were, and her stepmother looking at her with a face she had never seen, wiped clean of honey, empty and cold as a pot scraped to the metal. "From today," Nwakaego said, "you will finish your work before you eat. And in this house, the work is never finished." That was the beginning, and it lasted 5 years. Understand something about Nwakaego because it matters for everything that follows. Nwakaego was not careless in her wickedness. Careless wickedness gets caught. Hers was a craft practiced with the precision of a seamstress. She never struck Oluchi any way a bruise would show, never starved her completely that the girl's body would tell the village. And the moment word came that Masiejike was returning, the honey came back. Fresh food, kind words, new wrappers for both girls. "Your daughter, eh? That girl is my joy. Ask herself." And Oluchi, 11, 12, 13, would say, "Yes, Papa, all is well." She had tried once in the 2nd year, only hinted, that she was not always happy. Nwakaego wept for 2 days, loudly, asking her ancestors what she had done to deserve a stepchild who wanted to scatter her marriage, until Masiejike himself begged Oluchi to apologize. The lesson planted itself deep. Silence was survival. And what of Chidera, the stepsister? Pay attention to this girl, because before we are finished, she will matter more than anyone could guess. Chidera was not wicked. She was weak, which is a different sickness. Her mother's beautiful face and none of her mother's iron. When Nwakaego heaped both girls' chores onto Oluchi's head, Chidera looked away. When Oluchi ate cold scraps in the storeroom, Chidera ate hot soup in the parlor and kept her eyes on her plate. But there were nights, and Oluchi never forgot them, when the storeroom door would creak open, and Chidera would slip in without a word, pressing something into her hands. A piece of dried fish, 2 boiled eggs wrapped in a leaf. Once, on a cold Harmattan night, her own blanket, taken back before dawn so her mother would not notice. In daylight, Chidera belonged to her mother, but in the darkness, some small stubborn coal of conscience still glowed in her, and Oluchi warmed her hands on it, because it was the only warmth the house offered. By 16, Oluchi's days had settled into a shape as fixed as the sunrise. She woke in darkness before the first cock, out of habit so deep she no longer needed waking. She swept while the stars were still out, trekked to the stream twice before the sun cleared the hills, washed, pounded, weeded, cooked, and here was the bitter joke of it. She cooked beautifully because her mother had taught her, and so the cooking became Oluchi's duty, while the compliments became Nwakaego's harvest. Visitors would suck their fingers and praise the woman of the house, and Nwakaego would smile and accept, while the girl who had made the soup carried water in the backyard. And yet, and this is the thing about Oluchi you must carry with you into the forest, 5 years of this had not curdled her. Her mother's saying had taken root where no one could reach it and pull it out. The hand that gives does not sleep hungry. Oluchi gave. It made no sense, and she did it anyway. Her own small portion to the mad old man the market children threw stones at. Firewood carried for old Mamangosu every market day, though her own neck was raw from the water pot. A torn school uniform mended secretly for the neighbors' twins, so their mother would not flog them. The village saw. The village always sees, and the women at the stream would murmur, "Adaogo did not die. She is walking around in that girl's body." One person at that stream watched more closely than the rest. Her name was Mbori, a widow near 60, a seller of ogiri and bitter herbs, with a laugh like a cracked bell and eyes that missed nothing. She had been Adaogo's closest friend from girlhood. They had taken their first teeth together, as the elders say, and she had never, not for one single day in 9 years, believed that her friend died of any ordinary stomach sickness. She had said so once, loudly, at the funeral itself, and had been hushed by her own relatives. "Mbori Biko, this is grief talking. Do not put fire in a widower's roof." So she had swallowed it. But a swallowed stone does not digest, it sits. And Mbori had spent 9 years watching Nwakaego with the patience of a fisherman watching a float, waiting for the day it would move. She made herself a fixture in Oluchi's life in small ways Nwakaego could not object to. Ground nuts pressed into the girl's palm at the market, an extra cup of ogiri, because your mother never let me pay for anything, so now you will suffer my debt. And questions, always gentle, always sideways. "Are you eating well, my daughter? Show me your hands." These are not the hands of a girl being treated like a daughter. Oluchi never complained to her. Silence was survival, and survival had become instinct. But Mbori did not need her to. She read the girl like market women read the sky before rain. It was Mbori who first noticed the other thing too, the strange thing. It happened on an afternoon in Oluchi's 16th year, as the two of them walked back from the stream past the 2 Iroko trees at the mouth of the forbidden path. The wind moved through the forest, and the whispering rose the way it always did, 1,000 soft voices saying words just below hearing. Everyone in Umazu hurried past that sound. But that afternoon, Mbori saw Oluchi slow down. She saw the girl's head turn toward the trees, her face go soft and listening, her lips part slightly. And then Oluchi shook herself like someone waking and walked on. "You heard something," Mbori said. It was not a question. Oluchi said, "It's just leaves, too quickly." Mbori stopped walking. She took the girl's wrist, the wrist with the red coral beads, and held it, looking at the bracelet for a long, quiet moment. "Your mother was not an ordinary woman, you know that much. But there are things you do not know because you are too small. When we were girls, there was a season of hunger in this land, a terrible season, and in that season, your mother used to go to the edge of that forest alone in the evenings, carrying a small portion of whatever she had, sometimes 3 groundnuts, I swear to you, 3, and she would set it down between those 2 Iroko trees and say, 'Whoever is hungry in there, you are my neighbor too.' People laughed at her. Feeding the bush, they called it. She never stopped. And Oluchi, hear me well, in that whole season, when children were dying in villages all around us, not one person in your mother's compound so much as fell sick." Mbori released her wrist. She said, "I am not saying anything," in the way people say when they are saying everything. "Come, walk quickly, evening is coming." Oluchi walked home with the whispering still moving somewhere behind her thoughts, And that night, for the first time, she dreamt of the 2 Iroko trees. And in the dream, the path between them was not dark at all, but lit from somewhere deep within, like a hallway in a great house where someone has left a lamp burning, expecting a visitor. 3 weeks later, her father came home, stayed 9 days, and announced the longest journey of his trading life. A big contract, he said, eyes shining, palm oil to a buyer in Onitsha, and from there, goods to carry north. 3 months, maybe 4. When he returned, he said, holding both girls by the shoulders, their lives would change. A bigger house, both girls back to school, uniforms and all. He kissed Oluchi's forehead, told Nwakaego to take care of his treasures, and mounted his loaded motorcycle in the grey light of dawn and rode away down the Onitsha road. Oluchi stood at the gate watching the red dust settle behind him and could not have told you why some voiceless part of her wanted to run down the road after him, shouting, "Wait, take me with you." She only knew that when she turned back toward the house, Nwakaego was standing in the doorway watching her perfectly still, with an expression Oluchi had never seen in 5 years of studying that woman's face for weather signs. Not the cold look, not the honey look, something new. It looked, though Oluchi had no way to understand this yet, like a woman who has finally made a decision she has been circling for a long, long time. The change began the very first week. It started with the food. Oluchi's portions shrank to almost nothing, a scoop of gari, a fist of yam, once a day after every chore was done. Then came the accusations, a missing cup, missing money. Money later found exactly where Nwakaego had tied it, though the beating had already happened, and no one untied a beating. Then Nwakaego went through the storeroom while Oluchi was at the stream and took things. Adaogo's wooden comb, gone. The one good wrapper Mazi Ejike had bought his daughter, sold, and Oluchi learned it when she saw a girl from another compound wearing it in the market. Only the bracelet survived, and it survived because Oluchi never took it off, and because the one time Nwakaego reached for it, grabbed the girl's wrist in the kitchen and said, "Those dirty beads are juju, remove them," something happened that neither of them ever spoke of afterward. The moment the woman's fingers closed on the coral, a wind came through the compound. Out of a clear, still afternoon, a single hard gust slamming the kitchen shutter, whirling dust and dry leaves through the doorway, knocking the soup pot off its stones. Nwakaego released the wrist. The wind died as if a door had shut. The two of them stood in the settling dust, staring at each other, and Nwakaego wiped her hand slowly against her wrapper, wiped it again, and walked out without a word. She never touched the bracelet. But Oluchi noticed that from that day, her stepmother watched her differently. Not with contempt, with something that lived one compound over from contempt, with fear. You may be asking yourself the question Oluchi asked herself on her mat in the storeroom every night of that terrible season. Why now? 5 years, the cruelty had held a shape, sharp but careful, cruel but calculated. Why was the care gone? Why did it feel, suddenly, less like malice and more like preparation? Hold that question. It has an answer, and the answer is coming, but like all the worst answers, it arrives in its own time. The escalation found its rhythm. Week 2, Oluchi was no longer allowed to eat inside the compound at all. She took her scraps to the back fence, alone, like a dog. Week 3, the public phase. Nwakaego slapped her at the stream in front of a dozen women over a water pot that had been cracked for 2 years, slapped her twice, screaming thief and witch, words chosen deliberately, planted in public soil where words grow fastest. That night, 3 different women passed Mbwari's stall to report what they had seen, and Mbwari sat in the dark of her small house for a long time, turning her swallowed stone over and over. Week 4 brought the visitor. He came at dusk, when honest visitor ending, a lean man in a red and black wrapper with a goatskin bag and cowries braided into his beard, walking with the unhurried step of a man who is never questioned. His name was Nwakaego, and he was a dibia, not the respected kind who set bones and deliver babies, but the other kind, the kind honest people greet in the daytime and avoid after dark. Oluchi was carrying water when he arrived, and she saw how her stepmother's whole body changed receiving him. Head lowered, hands pressed together, the frightened reverence of a debtor greeting a money lender. They went inside. The door was barred, and Oluchi stood in the darkening backyard with the pot on her neck and understood that whatever was happening to her had a plan behind it, and the plan had just walked into her father's house wearing cowries in its beard. Nwakaego came 4 times in the weeks that followed, always at dusk, always the barred door, and after every visit, the house grew colder. After his second visit, Nwakaego stopped calling Oluchi by her name entirely, began calling her that thing, as if the girl's name had become dangerous to pronounce. After the third, Chidera's midnight delivery stopped, and this caught deepest of all, because when Oluchi caught her stepsister's eye the next morning, Chidera did not look away in the usual soft, guilty manner. She looked frightened. She held Oluchi's gaze for 1 heartbeat, 2, something she was forbidden to say pressing against the inside of her face, and then Nwakaego's voice called from the house, and Chidera turned and went. The person who refused to turn and go was Mbwari. The old woman had begun finding reasons to pass the compound daily, and Nwakaego, who could not bar the door against a respected widow without feeding the very gossip she feared, endured the visit with gritted teeth. Mbwari would sit on the visitor's bench, shell groundnuts, talk about nothing, and watch everything: the wraps of fufu going into the house, the scraps going to the back fence, the way Oluchi's collarbones had begun to stand up under her skin like roots after erosion. And one market day, she caught Oluchi's arm behind the ogiri stall and looked her over from head tie to heels and said, "Enough is enough. I am sending word to your father." "No!" The force of it surprised them both. Oluchi lowered her voice. "Mama Mbwari, please, if my father hears anything, she will meet him first. She always meets him first. And by nightfall, I will be the wicked one who scattered his marriage. It has happened before, and this journey is everything to him." She shook her head. "I have survived 5 years. I can survive 3 months." Mbwari was silent for a long moment. "Listen to me," she said finally. "Hear an old woman. There is a difference between a wicked person and a desperate person. A wicked person wants you to suffer. A desperate person wants you gone. For 5 years, that woman was wicked. What I am seeing now," she lowered her voice to a breath, "is desperation, and I do not yet know what she is desperate about. So you will do something for me. Every market day, you will find my stall and greet me, so that my eyes see you alive. If one market day comes and you do not greet me, Mbwaru will hear my mouth. All of it. Do we understand each other?" They understood each other. And for 2 more market days, Oluchi came and greeted her, and the old woman's eyes counted her ribs and said nothing. It was 3 nights before the 3rd market day that Oluchi heard the thing she was never meant to hear. She had been sent to bed without food that evening, a punishment for a crime invented at sunset, and hunger is a poor pillow. Long past midnight, Oluchi arose to drink water from the clay pot in the kitchen, moving on bare, silent feet the way 5 years of survival had taught her. And as she passed along the back wall of the main house, she saw the thin blade of lamplight under the shutter of Nwakaego's room and heard voices. 2 voices. One was her stepmother's, the other belonged to a man, and it clinked when it spoke, like cowries knocking together. Nwakaego, in the house, past midnight, with the compound gate barred. Do not judge her for stopping. You would have stopped.
anyone breathing would have stopped. Oluchi pressed herself into the darkness against the wall below the shutter, and this is what the night gave her. Or tell you again what I saw, since your ears refuse it the first time. The Dibia's voice, dry and unhurried. I have cast it 3 times now, 3 times the same answer. The stars of the 2 girls in this compound are not equal. One star is ordinary. It will rise a little, marry, bear children, grow old. A decent star, that is your daughter. Silence. The lamp flickered against the shutter. The other one, a soft rattle, cowries on a mat. The other one carries her mother's star, and her mother's star did not finish its business in this world. It stopped. Something stopped it. A pause, long enough to be an accusation. And a star that you stopped does not die, woman. It waits. It gathers. Everything the mother star was owed is sitting on that girl's head waiting for its season. I have seen her season. It is close, and when her rising comes, it will be like a flood in the night. And your daughter's ordinary star and your own, the cowries rattled once more, softly, like a snake settling, will be underwater. Servants in the house of the orphan. That is what I saw, 3 times. And then Nwakaego's voice, and Oluchi, crouched in the dark, did not recognize it at first, because in 5 years she had heard that voice cold, sweet, furious and false, but she had never once heard it terrified. Then, finish what I paid you to finish. You said the charms will press her down. You said what is true. Charms press flesh. They do not press what is following that girl. For the first time, something moved under the Dibia's dryness. I put my hand toward her the last time I came here, in the yard, and something looked back at me, woman. Out of the air itself. 30 years I have done this work, and what walks behind that child, I do not have the teeth to bite. There is no powder for it. As long as she stands on this earth, where her mother's blessing can find her, a pause. Then, Nwakaego said very quietly, then she must stand somewhere else.
What came next was spoken so low that Oluchi caught only pieces. But the pieces were enough, and each one dropped into her stomach like a stone into a well. A place her mother's eyes cannot follow, the Dibia's voice. Ground that does not belong to the living, the old forest. What lives there settles all accounts in its own way. No body, no grave, no questions. And then her stepmother's voice, flat and final. The voice of a woman signing her name to something. Before her father returns, give me the day. Cowries rattled, the lamp shifted. Oluchi was already moving, one silent bare foot after another, back into the storeroom, down onto her mat, where she lay with her eyes open until the cocks began, holding her mother's bracelet with both hands. Now the question of 5 years had its answer, and I want you to sit with it the way Oluchi had to, because this is the hinge on which the whole story turns. The cruelty was never only spite. Underneath it, all along, there had been fear. Nwakaego had consulted her Dibia the way the guilty always do, paying and paying, asking the same question in different words. Am I safe? Did it end with the mother? And the answer had come back 3 times. No. What you buried is growing. And here is the part that should make your skin cold. Only a person with something buried needs to ask that question. Oluchi took something, stopped her mother's star for riddle talk. She could not know, not yet, that she had just heard the closest thing to a confession Nwakaego had ever spoken aloud. The forest would know, but we have not reached the forest. What Oluchi understood, lying rigid on her mat, was simple and complete. Her stepmother meant to kill her, had chosen the manner, and had set the deadline. She had perhaps a day. She spent it making a plan that shames no one for its smallness, because it was the plan of a 16-year-old girl with no money, no relatives within reach, and one friend. Market day was tomorrow. She would go to the stream at dawn as always, then to the market as always, and there she would tell Mbori everything, the midnight voices, the forest, all of it.
Mbori would know what to do. Mbori always knew. Perhaps she would hide her. Perhaps they would send word to her father through the motor park drivers. One more morning of the obedient stepdaughter, she told herself. She had survived 5 years. She could survive one more morning. But wickedness, my friend, keeps its own calendar, and Nwakaego had not survived 9 years of her secret by being slow. Oluchi never made it to market day. At first light, before the stream, before Mbori's counting eyes, her stepmother was already standing over her mat, dressed for walking, holding 2 big harvest baskets and smiling. And of all the frightening faces Oluchi had catalogued in 5 years, none frightened her like this one, because this smile was real. "Get up, my daughter," Nwakaego said. My daughter, the words she had not used since Mazie Ejike's motorcycle vanished down the Onitsha road. "Get up. You and I are going to pick mushrooms." "Mushrooms?" "For your father's welcoming feast," Nwakaego explained as they walked, her voice bright as a new coin. "The special white ones that grow only in the deep shade. Just the 2 of us, eh? Mother and daughter." Chidera stood at the gate watching them go, and Oluchi looked back once and saw her stepsister's hand pressed flat against her own mouth, as if holding something in. She knows, Oluchi thought, with a strange, distant calm. She knows and she cannot say it, and she is watching me go anyway. The path bent, the compound disappeared. You are asking why Oluchi went, why she walked on her own 2 legs beside a woman she had heard order her death not 30 hours before. I will answer you honestly, because there was no move that saved her. Refuse, and what then? Run, where, on whose legs, with the whole village believing her a thief and a witch on her stepmother's word? No. Oluchi went because her only plan was time, and because a desperate hope had lit itself in her chest, the forest's edge. Everyone gathered at the forest's edge, firewood pickers, hunters, mushroom women. There would be eyes. Nwakaego could not do the thing where there were eyes. Stay at the edge, stay in the light, and tonight, tell Mbori. It was a good plan. It lasted until the 2 Iroko trees. Because when they reached the mouth of the forbidden path, Nwakaego did not walk past it. She stopped, set down her basket, and took Oluchi's hand gently, the way mothers take the hands of small children at a crossing. The white mushrooms, Nwakaego said, grow inside. Mama, the word came out of Oluchi cracked. Nobody enters there. Nobody. The elders. The elders said, Nwakaego said, are old women frightened of leaves. Your father's feast will be the greatest this village has seen, and it will be because of what you and I carry home today. And her grip on Oluchi's hand was iron wearing the glove of tenderness, and the whispering above them rose and rose as they passed between the Iroko trees, and the light changed the way light changes when a door closes behind you. I will not pretend to you that Oluchi was brave in the hours that followed, because in true stories, 16-year-old girls are frightened, and she was frightened past speech. She walked, and the forest closed its green fists around the path behind her, and the whispering never stopped, sometimes ahead, sometimes behind, sometimes horribly, exactly beside her ear. Nwakaego talked the whole way, bright-faced talk, her eyes never still, counting turnings, marking trees, a woman keeping her own path home while she walked another person away from theirs. Twice she said, "Wait here," and vanished and returned. The 3rd time, deep in the green dark where the canopy had shut out the sky, she pressed the empty basket into Oluchi's hand and pointed. Through there, the white ones, a whole colony, fill the basket. I'll gather from this side. And Oluchi, knowing and hoping against her own knowing, the way the drowning hope against water, went through there and found no mushrooms and turned around. You already stood in this moment with her. It is where our story began. The empty clearing, the name called into darkness that swallowed it like a stone, and the double understanding arriving together inside. Thunder, inside lightning. She never meant for me to come home, and colder, stranger, the forest has been waiting for me. Night in the forest of whispers does not fall. It rises, up out of the ground, out of the spaces between roots, pooling like dark water until it closes over your head. Oluchi did what anyone would do first. She panicked. She ran, fell, rose, ran, called, wept, until her legs gave and she found herself against a great fallen tree, hugging the basket like a child, her mother's beads pressed against her lips. And there, at the bottom of her fear, where there was nothing left to do but breathe, she noticed the thing that changed everything. The whispering was not random. It had never been random. Beneath its 100 soft layers, there was a rhythm, rising and settling, and it was the rhythm of a voice she knew. Not the words, the music of it, the particular rise at the end like a question being kind to you. Her whole childhood, that music put her to sleep. The whispering of the forest moved like her mother's voice.
"Mama," Oluchi said, into the dark. The whispering stopped. All of it. The entire forest, silent for the first time in living memory. A silence so total, it rang. And then, ahead of her, deep between the trees, a light appeared. Small and warm and orange, like a lamp left burning in the hallway of a great house where someone has been expecting a visitor. She followed it. Tell me you would not have followed it. The light moved as she moved, keeping its distance, leading her over roots and under branches that seemed to lift out of her way, until the trees opened without warning and Oluchi stood at the edge of a compound, in the dead heart of the forbidden forest, swept clean, ringed with a low mud wall, with a great mud house at its center, old beyond old, its walls carved with patterns that seemed to shift when she looked away. The lamp she had followed hung by the door, hanging from nothing at all, and in the yard 3 figures waited, so still she took them at first for carvings. The first was an old woman, bent like a question mark over a walking stick, dressed in a wrapper that might have been woven of grey moss. The second was an antelope, a bush buck, standing unnaturally still, with a raw, ugly wound torn along its foreleg, its dark eyes fixed on her, unblinking, deep as wells. The third was a child, a small boy, perhaps 6, thin as a broom straw, sitting in the dust with his arms around his knees, and when he looked up at her, his eyes had no white in them at all. They were black from lid to lid, like the spaces between stars. Every instinct of the living screamed at her to run, and Oluchi, hungry, lost, marked for death by the only mother left her, looked at the 3 of them and heard from somewhere 9 years deep a voice saying, "The hand that gives does not sleep hungry." She came forward, knelt, and greeted them properly as her mother had taught her. "Ndewono, good evening to this house. I am lost, but I did not come with empty hands." She had half a wrap of akara in her pocket, the whole of her food, the only wealth she had left in the world. She divided it into 3 parts, none for herself, and set the first before the old woman, the second before the black-eyed child, and the third, moving slowly, palm open, before the wounded antelope. Then she tore the hem of her own wrapper, the last good cloth she owned, and bound the antelope's bleeding leg, firmly and gently, the way her mother had once bound her own cut knee under the orange tree. And when that was done, seeing the yard's far corner unswept and a broom of stiff palm ribs leaning against the wall, she took the broom, because her hands had never known how to be idle in another person's compound, and she swept. She swept the yard of the spirits of the forest of whispers in the middle of the night, in the middle of the forbidden dark, humming, without knowing she was humming, the small evening song her mother used to hum. And behind her, unseen, the old woman and the child and the antelope all turned their heads at once, not toward Oluchi, but toward the great carved house, as if listening to instructions from someone inside, someone whose lamp had been burning by the door for 9 years, waiting for exactly this guest. When the sweeping was done, the old woman spoke, and her voice was the whispering of the forest gathered into one throat. 3 tests: the hungry elder, the wounded creature, the strange child.
Most who stumble into this compound fail all three by running. You are the second in 100 years to pass all three without being asked. She raised her bent head, and her eyes in the lamplight were the amber of old palm oil. The first, she said, had your face. They fed her that night, a meal that tasted like every good evening of her childhood at once, and gave her a mat in the yard, and Oluchi slept in the heart of the Forest of Whispers more safely than she had slept in 5 years in her father's house. In the days that followed, she could never say how many. Time in that place moved like water. The compound put her to work, and she learned that the tests had not ended, they had only stopped announcing themselves. She was asked to cook and given a single tuber of yam to feed the whole compound, and when she caught it, it filled the pot and filled it again, so long as she served herself last. The black-eyed child followed her everywhere, asking questions no child should ask. Why do you serve yourself last? Who taught your hand to give? If the ones who hurt you were hungry, would you feed them? And Oluchi answered honestly every time, even when the true answer to the last question, dragged up from her deepest place, was, I would feed them, and I would eat with my back turned so I would not have to watch them enjoy it. The child laughed at that, a sound like rain starting, and said, good. She said he would say something true instead of something sweet. The sweet ones fail. She. Oluchi noticed how often the compound said she. The old woman, consulting the carved house before answering questions. The antelope, healed now, wearing her cloth bandage like an ornament, standing each evening at the threshold, as if reporting. The lamp no one filled and never dimmed. Whatever ruled this compound lived in that house, and it knew her, and it was not ready to be seen. At night, when the whispering moved through the yard, Oluchi lay on her mat and let the music of it wash over her, and did not ask. Some part of her already knew and was afraid that asking would break it. Meanwhile, because the world you leave does not pause while the forest holds you, let me tell you what was happening in Umuazu. Nwaka had come home at dusk that first day, alone, staggering, wailing loud enough to raise 3 compounds. The girl has chased something into the trees before she could be stopped. The forbidden path, gone, gone. My husband's daughter is gone. She tore her wrapper. She was magnificent, and most of the village swallowed the story whole. But Mbori stood at the edge of the wailing crowd with her arms folded, watching Nwaka's grief the way one watches a masquerade, and said nothing at all, which those who knew her understood to be the most dangerous thing Mbori could say. The next morning, she sent her sister's son on the first lorry to Onitsha with a message from Ejike. Come home now. Tell no one you are coming. Your friend's stone has moved. And there was one other person in Umuazu who did not believe the wailing, and her disbelief was worse because it lived inside the liar's own house. Chidera had stopped eating. At night, Nwaka heard her through the wall bargaining with God in half-swallowed words. If she is alive, if you keep her alive, I will. On the 4th night, Nwaka shook her awake, gripped her jaw and put their faces close. You saw nothing. You know nothing. Everything I have ever done, I did for you. Remember that when you feel like talking. Everything for you. And that, everything, was the wrong word, because a lie has small doors in it, and children who have lived with a liar all their lives know where the doors are. How far back did everything go? Chidera was 17 when they came to this village. She remembered and had spent 9 years telling herself she did not remember the season of the wedding, the kind first wife who welcomed them, her mother's visits, so friendly, so frequent, always with food, then the kind first wife gripping her stomach. 3 days, the orange tree, everything for you. Chidera lay in the dark, 17 years old, and finally opened the door she had been holding shut since she was 7, and looked at what lived behind it. And from that night, she began, quietly, the way weak people begin, to change. Hold on to her. We are almost there.
Back in the forest, the water was folding toward its end. On the last evening, and Oluchi knew it was the last, the way a market is closing by the sound, the old woman came to her at the fire and said, tomorrow you go home. She says it is time.
Your season has come and it must find you standing on living ground. You have questions. Tonight you may ask one. Only one. Choose it well. And here, my friend, is where I ask you the question the forest asked her. Answer honestly in the comments before you hear what she chose, because your answer will tell you who you are. One question, guaranteed true. Would you ask what awaits you at home, the secret of the wealth, or the question that has no profit in it at all? Oluchi looked at the great carved house and at the lamp that never dimmed, and she asked, "The one who lives inside, the one you all call she, is it my mother?" Silence. Even the fire seemed to hold itself. The old woman looked at her for a long time, and when she finally spoke, her whisper-woven voice had gone gentle. "Your mother's body sleeps under an orange tree, and what your people call her soul is at peace, and that peace is real. But a woman like your mother, a hand that gave the way her hand gave, leaves something behind in the world. Call it her unfinished blessing. Call it her stopped star. It could not rest because it was cut off before it finished its work, and cut off is cut off whether the knife is sickness," the amber eyes held Oluchi's, "or something made to look like sickness. So it came here, to the oldest ground. It has kept this house 9 years. It lit that lamp the night she died. It has been waiting for the only door back into the living world that it will ever have." The old woman rose, joint by joint, on her stick. "It is not your mother the way you want it to be, child, but it loves you with everything your mother did not get to spend. And tomorrow, when you go, it goes with you, all of it at once. That is what your stepmother's dibia saw coming 3 times and could not name. That is the flood." She turned toward her own quarters, then paused, her back still turned. "It asks one thing of you tonight. It asks you not to open the door of the house, not because it hides from you, because if you see the shape it wears, you will not be able to leave, and it would rather lose the sight of you than keep you here among the dead. That," the old woman said quietly, "is how you know what it is. Only a mother chooses that." Oluchi did not open the door. She sat on its threshold all night instead, her back against the wood, the lamp burning above her, and she talked, told 9 years of everything to the door, the wooden comb and the storeroom and the back fence and Mbori's groundnuts and Chidera's midnight fish, and the whispering wrapped around the compound low and close, and if some of its rises sounded like weeping and some like laughing, she could never say where hers ended and the forest's began. It was the finest night of her life and the saddest, and they were the same night. Toward dawn, she said the last thing. "I don't want riches, you know. They keep saying my season, my season. I would trade the whole season to hear you say my name one time, in your own voice, not through leaves." The lamp above her flickered once, like something exercising enormous restraint. "I know," Oluchi said softly to the door. "I know. You would rather lose the sight of me." She pressed her palm flat against the wood, and the wood was warm, warm as a body, warm as a back you slept against as a child. "Then keep the name. I'll come to the edge of the forest and greet you in the evenings, like you used to greet them. Whoever is in there, you are my neighbor too." And from the other side of the door, very faintly, she felt the wood press back. In the morning, they sent her home, but the forest does not release a guest empty-handed, and it does not give without one final test. Behind the great house, on a wooden rack, sat 2 calabashes. The first was beautiful beyond description, polished deep red, banded in what looked like true gold, and it hummed, sweetly, insistently, like a market calling you to come and buy. The second was small, grey, cracked along one side and mended with old twine, and it sat in perfect silence. "One goes with you. Choose." Oluchi looked at both for a long moment. Then she picked up the ugly one. And her reasoning, exactly as she later told it, is worth more than the treasure itself.
In my mother's house, the pot that fed everybody was the old blackened one. The fine dishes only came out for visitors. I am not a visitor here." Behind her, the old woman made a sound it took Oluchi a moment to recognize as laughter. "The beautiful one," the old woman said, walking her to the path, "is full of everything a person thinks they want, and it eats the hand that carries it. The one you chose obeys the character of its owner, not her wishes. It opens only on living ground, only at your word, and it gives in the measure that you give. A giving hand will never see its bottom. A grasping hand will find it full of exactly what that hand deserves. Do not open it for pride or vengeance. Open it the way your mother put food between the Iroko trees." The trees were already thinning ahead, impossibly. A walk that took half a day inward took 30 steps outward, because the forest is only as deep as it wishes to be. At the last shadow, the old woman stopped and would go no further. "One more thing," she said, and her amber eyes were almost kind. "What was buried 9 years ago is coming up, child, soon. It will not come up the way you expect, and when it comes, it will cost you something you do not expect to pay. The dead do not want vengeance. Remember that when the day arrives. The dead want the truth, and truth and vengeance are not the same market." Then the whispering rose all around like a great breath, warm as an embrace and gone as fast, and Oluchi stepped out between the 2 Iroko trees into the ordinary staggering sunlight of the living world, holding a cracked grey calabashi on the morning of the 9th day since her death. Because, yes, 9 days. The village had counted 9 days. The elders had already spoken of a morning feast. So watch what Umuazu saw that morning. The dead girl, walking up the stream path in the gold light, thinner, straighter, with the settled look of a person who has sat all night against a warm door and made peace with what is on the other side of it. The first to see her was a small girl fetching water who dropped her pot, and Oluchi's first act back among the living was to promise the weeping child a new one, which tells you the forest had returned exactly the person it borrowed. Then the stream became a crowd, and the crowd became a procession, and the noise ran ahead of her the way Hamatan fire runs through dry grass, so that by the time it poured toward her father's compound, the compound had emptied out to meet it. And that is how Nwakaego, dressed in half-mourning, came through her gate at a run, and met, in front of 100 witnesses, the dead girl she had left in the forest to die. Hold this frame the way the village held it. The stepmother stopped mid-stride as if she had struck a wall, the color leaving her face in patches, the mouth opening, closing, opening, and the stepdaughter looking back at her, not with rage which Nwakaego could have survived, but with a terrible quiet knowing, and greeting her clearly in front of everyone. "Mama, good morning. I found the mushrooms." And into that ringing silence came the sound of a motorcycle. Mbori's message had flown true. Maziejike had ridden through the night, half mad with the second message that chased the first. "Your daughter is lost in Ohiaolu," and he came through the crowd like a bull through banana leaves, saw his dead child standing alive, and this big-shouldered trader who had not wept even under the orange tree, went down in the dust and wept like the rain coming. And Oluchi knelt and held her father, and over his shaking shoulder she watched her stepmother's face perform its magnificent recovery. The collapsing terror caught, remolded, reborn within seconds as radiant, weeping joy. "Miracle, miracle, my daughter is restored to us." And watching that mask reassemble itself, Oluchi understood exactly why the forest had said that truth and vengeance are different markets. Vengeance she could have taken that moment with one sentence in front of 100 people.
This woman led me in and left me, but it would have been her word against 9 years of that mask. Truth needed a stronger door to come through, so she said nothing, until the crowd began to ask, as crowds always ask, 9 days, child, what happened? What did you bring? And Oluchi set the little grey calabash down on the swept earth of her father's compound, on living ground, and answered, "I was shown kindness, and I was told that a giving hand never sees the bottom. Papa, you always said when you returned our lives would change. Come and see." She opened the calabash for the village, not for herself. Hear that, because it is why what happened, happened. She called forward the shattered pot child first and drew out a new pot, fine white clay, still cool from nowhere. She called Mbori, arms folded at the back of the crowd, entirely unsurprised, and drew out a head tie of woven gold that made the market women scream. And then it simply did not stop. Wrappers of George and lace, strings of true coral, bags of rice 2 men could not lift from a vessel a child could carry, money banded for the widow whose roof had fallen, for the man whose motorcycle the road had eaten, measured exactly to each need, because the calabash gave in the measure of its owner, and its owner had spent 16 years learning everyone's need by heart. By nightfall, the compound looked like a festival. By the next nightfall, the story had crossed 3 villages, and they came from everywhere to see the orphan of Umuazu and hear the name they gave her, because names are prophecy in our land. Nwanyi or Yaguzili, the girl the forest blessed. And through it all, the feasting, the singing, the father who would not let his daughter out of his sight, one woman moved with a fixed smile and dying eyes, watching a flood arrive exactly as it had been foretold to her 3 times by cowries on a mat, her ordinary star and her daughters underwater, servants in the house of the orphan. Nwakaego watched the calabash pour and pour, and the thought that took hold of her was not repentance. Women like her do not travel that road even when it is the only road out. The thought that ate her from inside for 6 days and nights was as simple and as old as envy itself. Whatever that girl did in the forest, my own daughter can do it too. On the 7th night, Nwakaego woke her daughter, pressed a basket into her hands, and laid out the plan in a feverish whisper. The forest, the path between the Iroko trees, everything the orphan got, you will get double. Go and be lost and be found and come home rich, and then let us see whose star sits highest in this village. And Chidera, hollow-eyed Chidera, who had barely spoken since the night she opened the door in her memory, listened in the dark and said, "All right, Mama, I will go." But hear me well, because every telling of this story that came after got this part wrong. Chidera did not go for the wealth. Sit with her for a moment. This girl, the story has taught you to half despise, lying awake all those nights with the door of her memory standing open, carrying a 7-year-old memory that had turned to fire in her chest, and no strength anywhere in her soft, frightened body to speak it. Twice she had walked toward Mazi Ejike with the words in her mouth and turned back. Weak, remember, not wicked. And weak people, when they finally move, do not move like heroes. They move sideways. Chidera had heard the returned girl tell the crowds, "In that place they already know everything about you. You cannot lie to the forest." And in her sleepless dark, an idea came to her that was mad and holy at once. If I cannot say it, I will go to the place where it is already known. So when her mother handed her the basket and the plan, she said, "All right, Mama." And before dawn, she walked out of the compound alone. Oluchi, who slept lightly after 5 years in a storeroom, woke at the gate sound, saw the small figure on the stream path, understood in one cold flash, and ran, barefoot, wrapper half-tied, and did not catch her. She reached the Iroko trees in time to see her sister step past between them into the green dark, and the whispering rose, and Oluchi stood at the edge, at the exact spot where her mother once fed the hungry bush, and did the only thing left. She called into the trees, "She is my sister. Do you hear me? Whatever she came for, she is my sister." The forest kept Chidera for 3 days. What happened inside, no living person saw, but the compound of the spirits keeps its accounts, so we may know this much, that a frightened girl came before the hungry elder, the wounded creature and the strange child, carrying not Akara, but a 7-year-old memory, and that when the black-eyed boy asked her the question he asks everyone, "What did you come to take?" Chidera, who had failed every test a soft life ever set her, knelt down in the swept yard of the dead and passed the one that mattered, "Nothing. I came to give something back. I came to put down what I saw." And she told them.
And above the compound, the whispering rose and rose and rose, and for the first time in 9 years, it did not sound like a question. It sounded like a woman who has finally been handed the thing she stayed for. On the third evening, at the hour when the light goes gold, Chidera came out from between the iroko trees. Oluchi was there. She had come every evening with food to set between the trees, keeping her promise to the door. And because the whole village now watched everything this family did, half of Umuazu was there too, and Mbori, and Mazie Ejike, and, dragged by the crowd's current, Nwakaego, whose heart leapt at the sight of her daughter, and then stopped. Chidera came empty-handed. No calabash, no gold. And her eyes were wrong, dark from lid to lid like the spaces between stars. She walked past her mother's grasping hands as if the woman were mist, to the center of the crowd, to Mazie Ejike, and opened her mouth, and the voice that came out was her own, and layered under and around it hundreds of others, soft as leaves. The forest keeps what is buried in it, but it returns what was buried in me. Papa Oluchi, I was 7. I saw. The season of the wedding, when your first wife welcomed us with 2 hands, my mother went to her 4 times with food. I licked the pot the 4th time, Papa. I licked the pot when she was not looking, and I was sick for 3 days, while your wife was dying. And my mother held me and wept, and said, if you ever speak of the pot, we will both hang. Adaogo did not die of any stomach sickness. My mother put her under the orange tree. Everything she has ever done, and here the chorus swelled, and the 2 iroko trees thrashed through the evening was windless. She did it for me. So I have brought it back. I could not carry it anymore. Silence, the kind in which 100 people can hear one woman's breathing. Every head turned to Nwakaego, and Nwakaego looked at the crowd, at her husband's face turning to stone, at the black-eyed child she had made, and she broke. Not with a confession. Her kind never confesses. She broke by running, and hear this, because the poetry of it was lost on no one, of every direction she could have run, she fled the eyes of the living straight toward the only darkness available, between the 2 iroko trees, into the forest of whispers. They say the whispering surged when she crossed the threshold, like a river taking a swimmer. She was never seen again. Nobody, no grave, no questions. The exact fate she had ordered for an orphan, measured back to her in her own basket. The forest settles all accounts in its own way. It had told her Dibia so, the Dibia who was found to have packed his shrine and vanished that same week, and she had thought the words were a weapon she could aim. Wickedness always thinks the proverb is about somebody else. Now, the ending. And if you have followed this channel for long, you know that I will not lie to you with a sweet one, because life does not cook only sweet soup, and neither did the forest. Justice came, yes. Truth came up out of the ground 9 years late in front of 100 witnesses, but count the cost with me the way Oluchi counted it in the quiet after. Her mother was still under the orange tree. Truth does not raise the dead, it only lets them rest. Her father, aged 10 years in one evening, learning he had shared 9 years of his bed with his first wife's death, he never fully unbent again, and every one of his remaining years he spent making the lie up to his daughter.
And Chidera, her eyes cleared with the seasons, slowly, like water settling. But the girl who came out from between the iroko trees never again spoke more than a few words at a time, as if speech itself had cost her a price she was still paying. She could not lie at all, as she flinched at the sound of pots. She lived in Oluchi's house because of course Oluchi took her in. Had you not learnt that much about her by now? The 2 of them planted a second orange tree beside the first, and on some evenings, the sisters walked to the edge of the forest and set down food between the iroko trees, one basket carried between 2 hands, while the whispering rose and settled around them like a mother checking her children before sleep. Oluchi became the wealthiest woman in 3 villages, and the calabash never showed her its bottom because her hand never learnt to close. She built the school. She rebuilt the widows' roofs. She paid for other people's daughters until an Oluchi became a word in those villages
for his stroke of undeserved kindness, given the way her mother had taught the whole world to give, quietly, stubbornly, to people who could never pay it back. The hand that gives does not sleep hungry. That was the whole secret, my friend. That was the treasure in the forest, not the calabash, but the character that chose the cracked one. Nwakaego spent 9 years and a woman's life trying to secure her daughter's future and destroyed it. Adaogo spent 3 groundnuts on the hungry bush in a famine and fed her daughter from beyond the grave. Wickedness builds fast and falls fast. Kindness builds slowly, underground, out of sight. And then one day, it stands up in the middle of your worst night, holding a lamp saying, "I have been waiting for you." So let me leave you with the question this story has been asking from the beginning. Chidera carried a deadly truth for 9 years because she was afraid. And when she finally put it down, it cost her dearly. But it set 2 families dead to rest. If you were carrying a truth like that, a truth that would burn your own house to light someone else's path, would you speak it? And when? Tell me honestly in the comments. I read every one. If this story touched something in you, do an orphan storyteller one kindness. Press the like button. Share this with one person who needs to hear that patience is not weakness. And if you have not yet joined this family, subscribe and tap the bell, because next week I am bringing you another story, and I promise you, you are not ready for it. The hand that gives does not sleep hungry. Good night, my people. Sleep well, and listen just for a moment to the trees outside your window. You never know who is whispering.